Good evening, listeners. It is 6 o'clock, Wednesday, December 31st, 1969, and you're watching A Decade in Review on ANN, America's News Network. Join us in remembering the highlights of the 60s before we bring in the 70s.
I couldn't find any good 60s news intro music.
Hello, listeners, and welcome to ANN, where we're bringing you the news of today in color for the very first time, and also celebrating a first in the White House. Only hours ago, John F. Kennedy, the first Catholic U.S. president, was inaugurated. Will he be able to pull America out of the societal, economic, and patriotic trends the Soviets are digging? Only time will tell. Time has told, listeners, and in a shocking turn of events, everything in foreign policy just got worse. After proving their inability to set their watches to the same time, the CIA's attempt to assassinate Fidel Castro, Cuban prime minister and communist leader, has failed. Not only is the man not dead, but 100 U.S. troops have been killed, and another 1,200 remain detained. The U.S. Bay of Pigs invasion has failed, and Cuban hostility towards the U.S. will probably be increased. I'm speaking today only moments after the State of the Union address, where Mr. Kennedy declared that the U.S. will indeed land an American on the moon before the close of the decade and before the Soviets. Along with his international aid program, the Peace Corps, Kennedy is certainly heading the U.S. in a direction of peace and progress during these dark and trying times. Hello, listeners. Earlier today, President Kennedy has delivered some troubling news to our fair nation. The Soviets have been caught building a nuclear stock in Cuba, a small communist island off the coast of the Caribbean, in firing distance of the U.S. Our president has assured us that the naval blockade will be enough to prevent the completion and deployment of these weapons, but in the case of failure, let the Soviets know that the U.S. will fight back twice as hard. We will not take this lying down. Mutual destruction is assured. Good afternoon, listeners. You're watching ANN, and for the first time in a long time, we are ecstatic to be bringing you good news hour. Before we go off to our first ever female anchor, Emily Dickerson, let me give you an update regarding the Cuban Missile Crisis. The Soviets have decided to be civil and remove their nuclear weaponry from Cuba. Capitalism and democracy will reign supreme. Off to you, Emily.
Hello, America. I'm Emily Dickerson, reporting on the Good News Hour for ANN. First, the economy is doing just swell. The workforce is increasing, but unemployment rates are staying at a stable and healthy 4.2%. And for us ladies, there's never been a better time to be a secretary. Jobs are opening up across America for women and African Americans alike. Next, the Peace Corps is becoming a popular volunteer organization for young Americans looking to better the world and aid poor countries. Hello, America. I'm Emily Dickerson, updating from outside of the White House, where President Kennedy, as part of his New Frontier program, has just signed the Equal Pay Act into law. Working women everywhere rejoice, as equal pay for equal work is now legally mandatory. America has taken a great step in ending gender discrimination in the workplace.
From Dallas, Texas, Parkland Memorial Hospital has confirmed that President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time. Though his current whereabouts are unknown, Vice President Lyndon Johnson will presumably take the oath of office promptly and be sworn in as the 36th President of the United States. We at ANN mourn the loss of a great president.
Hello, America. I'm here today with John Lennon, member of the phenomenal band The Beatles. Their records have been flying off the shelves and into the hands of young Americans ever since their U.S. debut on The Ed Sullivan Show only 3 weeks ago. Their nonsensical lyrics about drugs and freedom have captured the hearts of youngins everywhere.
Good morning, listeners. Yesterday, President Lyndon B. Johnson announced his vision for America's Great Society. Earlier this year, he unveiled his war on poverty, as the poverty rate is at a shockingly high 19%. The Great Society venture seems to be an extension of this policy. Under Great Society, President Johnson intends to improve the domestic status of America through the aforementioned war on poverty, but also by promoting environmentalism, arts, and the sciences. Hello, listeners. We have an update on yesterday's mass reports of tornadoes throughout the Midwest. Our field reporters have recorded approximately $238 million in damages and 258 deaths, with Indiana and Ohio being the hardest hit states. We have some images of the utter destruction here to my right. Truly a devastating disaster, especially to happen on the Lord's Palm Sunday. Good evening, listeners. In order to aid in its fight against the North and help staunch the cancerous spread of communism, the U.S. has decided to back South Vietnam in the Vietnamese War. U.S. troops have touched on the territory earlier today.
The same groups behind the free speech, civil rights, and feminism protests have also begun protesting the increased U.S. military presence in Vietnam, along with a controversial draft sending young Americans into violence. I'm here today in Washington at the center of a massive anti-war protest organized by the Student Democratic Society. I am certain that this youth activism will send ripples through America.
And now, a word from our sponsors.
Are you tired of those lazy, reckless, self-indulgent, drugged-up counterculture hippies? Are the SDS and other student advocacy groups with their constitutionally protected self-entitled protests getting you down? Everyone knows that the rejection of conformity, capitalism, and consumerism is the death of organized society. Get those pesky liberals out of your way with liberal spray. Environmentalist? Gone. Expressor of freedom? Gone. It could even scourge the toughest societal stains. It's a Tide Do or Die world out there, and liberal spray can help you profit off of it all.
Good evening, listeners. You're ringing in the new year, 1966, with ANN. Now over to new in the newsroom, Michael. Hello. This year's been huge for President Lyndon B. Johnson's Great Society movement, with the Medicare and Medicaid both being passed, which provide health care to elderly and poor, respectively, along with the food stamp program being instated, which provides basic food and sustenance for America's poor and destitute. Along with that, the Economic Opportunity Act has been passed, which provides a myriad of programs to help get young and poor Americans into the workforce. The administration has also taken a stand against pollution with the Motor Vehicle Control and Water Quality Acts, which help the government regulate the toxins being dumped into our environment. Funding for America's space race also continues. That's all for me. And we're back, continuing our debate on President Johnson's Great Society with our new White House correspondent, Emily Dickerson.
Yes, hello ANN. As I was previously articulating, President Johnson's Great Society is great on paper, but it actually has very little impact on the impoverished Americans, and its economic strain via increased taxes is simply not sustainable. The truth is, working class Americans just should not be responsible for providing handouts.
Hello, Michael McCormick, reporting from outside the Pentagon, where riots have broken out over the Vietnam situation. After Mr. King voiced his moral opposition to the war earlier this year, support for the anti-Vietnam movement has skyrocketed. Oh, here's a protester now. Miss, would you like to say anything?
Yeah. Over 15,000 Americans have died in Vietnam, and another 100,000 have been injured. And President Lyndon B. Johnson, his frivolous military spending costs us taxpayers $25 billion a year. The U.S. has no business in Vietnam, killing all those innocent Vietnamese people. It's not right, it's undemocratic, and we have enough problems at home. We do not need to go slaughtering and meddling in Vietnam. We need to make peace, not war.
Good evening, listeners. I'm tasked today with delivering some devastating news. The producers have argued against the presentation of this truth in an effort to prevent the polarization of our audience, but nonetheless, civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr. has been assassinated today. He has been an icon of peace and a catalyst for change in a systemically flawed America where 10.5% of Americans are forced to live in a slaughterhouse, where 10.5% of Americans have been failed by a societal contract that has never upheld its own terms and conditions. White media publications will try to bury this man under false accusations and lack of coverage, but rest be assured that we at ANN will stand for a man who has done no wrong. We will stand for a man who uses his constitutional rights to fix America's fundamentally broken constitution. The murder of Mr. King will not be overlooked in the history books. His contributions to an equal and just society will not be forgotten. We shall not let history repeat itself.
Hello, America. Today marks a great leap towards equality. The Civil Rights Act, which criminalizes segregation and discrimination on the basis of sex, race, religion, or country of origin, has been passed. The marches and protests have finally gained some legal traction. The civil rights movement and push towards equal rights for Black Americans is stronger than ever, and with the support of the mass progressive youth of America, I am certain that this will not be the last we hear from the growing number of powerful and educated Americans.
Things are buzz in Washington today. Richard Nixon has just been inaugurated as the 37th president of the United States of America. And other news, the space program is scrambling to get an American to the moon before the close of the decade, as proclaimed in the late Mr. Kennedy's State of the Union. We now have images from yesterday's Cahoga River fire. The cause of the 5-story flames is attributed to pollution in the river. Protests against corporate pollution and destruction of environments have cropped up all over the country, headed by the so-called hippies of the newly dubbed counterculture movement. More protests are expected to arise.
Apollo 11, the spacecraft, which intends to put a man on the moon, just launched moments ago from Kennedy Space Center.
Is that a clip on McCormick?
No.
This is a momentous occasion and a testament to our nation's strength. Yes, live on ANN. I'm receiving a message. Yes. Oh my. The Apollo 11 spacecraft has landed. NASA has successfully put 2 Americans, Mr. Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin, on the moon before the Soviets. This is one great nation. Capitalism and democracy will always conquer communist oppression. Now onto the live feed. This is a day for the history books.